Welcome everyone. Kevin Carpenter here with C++ Now this time, and I'm sitting with Pete Muldoon. Pete, I have to say, like, I've known Pete for years, but this is the first time that, I say years, it's almost 4 or 5 now, but this is the first time I get to interview you. So tell everybody about yourself.
Hi, my name is Pete Muldoon. I'm originally from Ireland. I've been in software engineering for a long, long time. I first used C++ in 1991, back in the very early days when I don't think there really was a spec going around. And I worked for 20 something odd years as a consultant. Prior to that, I worked in speech recognition in British Telecom Research Labs. And for the last decade or so, I've plied my trade inside of Bloomberg, where I'm a senior engineering lead for Ticker Plant and leading its migration efforts. So I have some hobbies, as you see behind me. I skydive. This is an older picture. I have about 1,800 skydives. I am a fourth degree black belt in Krav maga, the Israeli martial art, and I play the accordion, which is why I need the self defense. So that's a brief rundown of who I am.
You know, I think of things that I do, like when I code, I get stressed out and I go to the gym. I don't think of getting stressed out and going skydiving. So kudos for that.
It's a wonderful sense of perspective. When there's a problem in production, you think, yeah, that is a problem, but I've had 5 reserve rides where my main chute hasn't worked, and that's real time problem solving with very harsh constraints of not getting the right solution. So it is a way of gaining perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk about the talk you're going to give at C++ now, and you've given lots of talks. I mean, the one that always sticks with me was your singleton talk, because it it helped me remove singletons on a couple projects, which was really cool. But first thing I want to hit you up with is C++ now. What do you like most about coming to C++ now?
Well, I like I don't know, I call the conferences have various kind of flavors or feels. And CPP while it's very large and very, there's a lot of people, a lot of things going on, a lot of tracks, you can get kind of lost in the crowd. And especially if you're new to a conference, you can get lost somewhat in the shuffle. In CPP now, it's more tight knit. It's a smaller conference. I think there's more rubbing shoulders with the people who are doing, very special things with the language, and they're bringing things into the language, or they're talking about things that may have problems. So I think it's good in that sense. But I think overall conferences, if you've never been to a conference, it widens your worldview on the language. And for many years, I had never gone to conference. I didn't really know they existed, was my excuse. But when I went there, it opened up my outlook. And I think it makes you a better overall programmer and allows you to bring things back to your workplace and to the people you work with. And I think that's kind of invaluable, and also is a good reason why your management change should also encourage you to go to conferences.
It's interesting you say that too, because yeah, I didn't start going to conferences. I think the first conference I went to was the first CPP con, before, I think it was going native, and then it became CPP con. But to your point, there's just such a variety of talks that almost no matter what you're doing, you're going to pick up little bits in each one that you're going to be able to go back and directly apply or share with members of your team, and you get those little incremental builds. And I was talking with Ben Dean the other day, and he said the thing that he loved is you end up getting also excited, things that you hadn't thought of using before, and you see a new way of using it.
Right, right. And it can be as simple as, some people may not have seen Godbolt before. Some people may not have, come across, oh, you can do this with variants, right? So I think it's a good sampling. And if you think of it another way, which is the way I like to think of it, is if you go to a conference like CPP now, you have 5 days of studying and sitting in your craft, right? And I do judge software engineering as a craft, not just something that you kind of hammer stuff together. So
Oh
it's a
yeah.
way of sitting and sort of almost, being almost apprentice, going in and looking at all that goes on. And it's very difficult, although you can look at YouTube videos, it's very difficult to clear 40 hours in your week and sit down and watch videos, right? So going to a conference sort of naturally lends it to you, honing your craft in software engineering.
Well, and even there, like, whenever I compare it to learning language in general, right? Because you can sit, so I've been learning German this last year because I have family from there, and I can use Duolingo all day. But when my cousins came, you actually learn the language when you're having to sit there and put sentences together, not just memorize something, or,
Right.
just because I saw something on YouTube, until I actually take that piece out and try to write it in, my code editor and compile it. That's the actual, as you're saying, adding to the craft, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. So, like I say, I'm a big proponent of it, and I usually try and bring some people who haven't attended conferences from my area, and it's generally been a good experience for them.
So, out of all the time that you've for the conferences you've attended, who's name like two people that you've met that have been big or enjoyable, that or that you really took things from. And I get that might be a tall order because, like, I'm like, well, I met Pete. I took a lot from him. So
Well, it's a tough one to go on. I know because I was dealing with in the current area I am testing. I had some very long discussions with Dave Stefan, who was a bit of a test maestro. So we kind of bounced ideas off each other there. That was a big help. And I just like watching talks like Kate Gregory or Andre Adrescu, where they sort of really pass over the what I'll call the syntax of the language.
yeah,
Sometimes we get bogged down in the syntax. It's the how to get the meaning and intent and properly communicate to, as I say, the programmer in the future that's reading this code. So I guess they would be people I've taken particular direction off of.
right on. So if you have someone that's new to a conference, they've never been, they're coming to C++ now as their first time, or any conference, I guess, for that matter. Tips for someone that's new going to a conference when you think back to your first time when you started going.
Well, maybe I was atypical because when I went to my first conference, which is CPP Con, I knew no one and no one knew me. And I just sat at tables and asked people, how did you get into C++? Because it's people take unusual paths in it because it's not something that's taught at a lot of universities, as far as I'm aware. So when I see younger guys and they're doing it, and I was just fascinated about the range. People like were in British Petroleum, they were in Canon, and it was like, wow, this is really cool. So I just went round and talked to everybody uh, at the tables when we were eating. I was not shy or bashful about it. And then when I sat down and I was looking at talks, um, I wasn't that intimidating to ask questions, but I certainly went up afterwards or went to the person sometime later on in the day if I ran across them and asked them questions, even Bjarne. So
Yep.
at Beacon. So I think it's a great you have to put yourself out there though, I think a bit. So it's like try not to be shy, right? I know it's a tall order, or if you have a couple of your friends, you sort of go as a group to
Yep.
someone and ask them questions. That can sort of be less intimidating. But I would say get involved and look at these talks with the thing in your head, not wow, this is so amazing, I could never do that, but what could I talk about? Looking at these guys and what they're talking about and giving the advice out. Is there anything I could do to add some value to the community by giving a talk at a conference? So
You know,
that's right there.
and so I think, yeah, that's excellent, especially the fact of, going up to talk to people, because I think that's a misconception. It's like, especially at the conferences, most everyone's really approachable, everyone's really relaxed, and especially at C++ now, because like you said, it's a small group. It's not 1,000 people. We top out at 140 people at the conference. Um,
And it's not just 140, people. It's like there's a lot of real experts there and a lot of
oh
people that
yeah,
have drive the language and can quote the standard off by heart. So I think that's amazing.
you're absolutely, yeah. And it's funny because I think of like the library in a week. You get Marshall and Jeff Garland helping to do that. Sean Parent, or yeah, the people that you can walk up and get access just to sit and chat with, and everybody's happy just to talk about code, or just, even that more personal aspect of things as well. So
Yeah.
you're giving a talk this year, but hearing about when you first started to going to conferences, I think that's pretty cool, because you've been giving talks now for how many years?
Oh, not that long. It's only like 3 or 4 years I only came across the conference scene. I know when I went to my first conference, I said, I can do that. And the next conference I went to, I gave a talk. So it
Right.
inspired me.
That's cool. So this year you're doing exceptionally bad, the story on the misuse of exceptions and how to do better. And I love the title because I read exceptionally bad and my mind immediately went to thinking of my code. But then I saw the rest of the title.
No, you're much too hard on yourself, Kevin. Now, at my first CPP now, a guy, Andre Weiss, gave a talk on demystifying exceptions. And I had a lying grumble inside me about exceptions at that time. When Andreas, sorry, gave the talk, I thought this is a pretty good mechanics and how it works. And now I'm even less impressed with what's going on. And it has smoldered sort of silently inside me for these past 3 or 4 years. And I decided to take a deep dive and I look at it. And what I've come up with is, I think, a pretty good talk, which will dive into the origins of what happened, going back to when Bjarne was first introducing them to the language, the
Mm-hmm.
ideals behind them, right? And then taking some viewpoints. How do we look? What is an exception? So one way of looking at exception is in a mechanism, something that's caught, something that's thrown. We delve into the mechanics so you have some idea of exceptions. Next thing is the philosophy of exceptions. How should we be using exceptions? What is the philosophical arguments for what exceptions should be? And then we get to the next viewpoint, which is what is an exception from a usage point of view. So that's the main meat of the talk, where I look at a lot of different ways exceptions are used, sometimes poorly, like resource handling, huge hierarchies, retry mechanisms. And we go through a lot of the ways exceptions are used, and I will systematically polish off quite a few of them and leave what I think is the nugget behind. And given that, we will look at what an exception class actually should do and how we should design a class. And then at the very end, I will show you my single exception class, which I believe replaces in a much better way the whole of the stud exception hierarchy and any other use of exceptions I've come across. Now, this will be a challenge to the community in front of me, which I expect them to take up as to try and beat this thing down. But I think it's going to, at the end of the day, give you a good appreciation for how we use exceptions in the language. And the very last thing is, you know, what, how are we using exceptions in the language? It's like, how should we be using exceptions in the language? So that was kind of where we will talk about what I will call the truly exceptional and where exceptions do benefit. So it's not a talk that demolishes exceptions. It gets rid of, I think, a lot of the dicey uses of exceptions and
Right.
shows you what's left and how you can properly use that to add value to your code.
Yeah, I've seen code bases where exceptions is the error handling overall instead of, handling errors. And then, for example, in our code, you know, exceptions are that last resort before something is going to truly die. And that's about the only way that we end up using them. And it's been interesting to see over the years the way it's been used in between. And I remember that talk from Andreas. I was going to say there's another one that I remembered that was talking about the cost of exceptions. I want to say that was like in 18 or so, I think. But it's
Why delve into that? It's not a very efficient way to get stuff moving around your code, right?
yes.
And there are better ways, but it comes down to the situation. And one of the problems with exception, I think that people don't really think about is that exceptions can work well if you have control over both the throw and the catch,
Okay.
right? If you don't have control over the throw, you're at the mercy of whoever's throwing. And he can't know your relationship to the code that you're using, right? So he may say, look, not looking in a database, or I go to insert something because it's duplicate, I should throw an exception. You say, well, that's something that is, I'm expecting a lot, right? Because of the way I have the maybe parallel processing, I have an optimistic way of locking things, right? So I try and put it in. If it fails, it's okay. He can't know that. So the relationship is hidden from the person throwing it unless you're writing both sides of the exception. And that causes, I think, a lot of problems, right? Where we have to catch exceptions and swallow them, catch exceptions and change them over to error codes. And it's really not a very efficient way of doing things. But I will delve into this in some depth over the course of 90 minutes. And I hope people will be able to take something away with them and say, this is how I can use exceptions better. Here's how I want to use exceptions going forward.
Right on. So one last question. Outside of C++, is there something that you really enjoy when you go to Aspen? that you'll get to do while you're there.
Yes, swimming. It's got a great pool. It's got this outdoor pool with a great view of the mountains, especially if it's early in the season. And with the altitude, you have to be careful. People who come jump in the pool and try and just swim, 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 and are, basically hypoxic by the time they reach the other end. But I really do enjoy the pool there, and it's
I
got
want
a
to
nice
say I
look.
seem to remember seeing you in there last year while it was snowing, and it's like it's showing it's supposed to be warmer this year, but it's Aspen, so the weather can change in a day.
Well, see, because I was early last year, so yes, there is me and a group of fellow speakers in the pool while it's snowing. So that's a pretty cool video, yes, that I've shown
Yeah,
quite a few
that
people.
is. Well, Peter, I want to thank you for your time today. I look forward to seeing you in Aspen in, geez, a week, I guess it is, because I know I'll be there next week, Saturday. Um, and so I look forward to seeing you when we get there.
Always a pleasure talking to you, and I hope to catch up with you in Aspen and have a beer.
Sounds great. We'll talk to you soon, Peter. Thanks again.
All right, so long. See you.
Bye.
Bye now.